You gotta read this. It's so good. Hey, what's up? Welcome to my best reads of 2024. I hope you're doing so good, and you're about to be doing even better because I'm about to tell you the best books that I read last year. I have a lot to tell you about, so let's just get into it. I would also really like to know what your best book of 2024 is. If you can pick one, if you can't, don't worry about it. I have 11 books to talk to you about. Book number 11 for me is a nonfiction. I always love when nonfiction makes it into my top books of the year because that's a hard ask for me for nonfiction to be one of my best books ever. Book number 11 is Big Mall by Kate Black. Big Mall, Shopping for Meaning, is a fantastic, funny, messy, still academic, still really profound piece all about shopping malls. It is a phenomenology of the mall. If malls make us feel so bad, why do we keep going back? Why do we keep shopping? It's about capitalism. It's about architecture. It's about animals. It is such a good piece, and I love it. Can we get a round of applause? Another Canadian author has made it onto my best books of the year. I'm super interested in these weird structures because I think a mall's just such a weird place. Kate Black's piece of nonfiction is extremely personal, and a lot of the time I don't find that works for me when authors try to insert a lot of their own personal experience and make it a tiny bit, not really an autobiography, but just like a tiny bit of that personal touch. I don't find that it works, but in Big Mall, I really related to it, and I really found myself wishing she had put a little bit more of that in because Kate Black grew up in West Edmonton Mall in Alberta, which is the biggest mall in North America. It's absolutely insane. It's cracked out of its mind. If you've ever been there, please let me know because I've never had the fever dream of walking through West Edmonton Mall. I've only heard so much about it. She details what the hell is the mall doing? What is it a representation of? What does it do to us when we walk through a mall? It's split into different chapters, all detailing different things having to do with the mall. For example, there's a whole chapter about animals in captivity in malls because that was a thing that's still a thing in West Edmonton Mall, I believe. It's just, I don't know, all of it is so unsettling. She has such good discussions, and it's never about proving a point. It's just all about hey, let's think about this together, let's talk through this together. It was so interesting. I found myself hooked. At times it did feel like maybe it was just kind of meandering, but I think for a piece like this, it leaned into the meandering, honestly, if that makes sense, and I think it just worked. Okay, hi, sorry about that. I had to move some things around and then I got really cold. This book touches a little bit on dead malls. If you are a big fan of dead malls, you can go to deadmalls.com. It's really spooky. You're into architecture of huge mega places because most of her examples do stem from West Edmonton Mall, among other big malls. But if you want to know more about the history of the mall, it's honestly quite sinister and unsettling, and I'm not a fan. And the person who designed the mall later came to regret it. I just think it's incredibly fascinating. If you like stuff about capitalism and our attitudes towards spending and shopping and money and buying and consumerism, this book definitely touches on that. And more than that, it's just about nostalgia because the mall is the place where Kate grew up and spent a lot of her childhood. So there's a lot of conflicting attitudes there. And if you're anything like me, I don't know how common it is anymore for kids to grow up in malls, but the mall is always where I was with my grandmother when I was very young. She would always take me to the small mall by our house, which is now totally a dead mall. Mall for me is also a very nostalgic place, not the huge flashy malls that I see now where I live, but the smaller, more quiet malls. The experience I had going with my grandma to the mall so often when I was little wasn't about buying things. It was really about having fun and making connections with people because this mall housed a lot of senior citizens. They would all go there for their coffee, or after church people would go to the mall and hang out and have a bagel. The food court was bopping. People held birthday parties at the mall. There was always something going on. For example, my grandma would always take me to Ripley's Reptile Zoo thing, which would have a pop-up at the mall. So it was a place of kind of wonder and definitely not focused so much on shopping or consumerism. Hardly remember a single trip where we actually bought something when we went to the mall, which I think now, at least the malls around here, that's not the case. They're not designed for that much community anymore. At least where I am, they're designed to have you come in, come out with so many purchases. So this also touched on that for me. It made me feel very nostalgic. I miss things like the little, things that you would put like a quarter in, the little animatronic rides that you would ride, or for example the fountains. That's what this book reminded me of on one side of the spectrum, and on the other it definitely delved deep into very uncomfortable, just distressing topics of capitalism and the world that we live in. So if you're interested in any of those things, big mall. Number 10 is The Membranes by Chita Wei. I'm gonna try not to blind you. This was a book club pick for my book club, The World Tour book club that I host on Fable. It's linked down below. This was the pick for Taiwan. So at this book club, our goal is to read a book from every single country in the world. We got through 12 books in 2024, and you're going to see at least a few of them on this list. So The Membranes. I don't think I actually ever got to properly talk about this anywhere, because I read this during a very turbulent time in my life when I was preparing to move and like looking for places to live and all of that stuff. But I read The Membranes, which is a wonderful piece of science fiction. This is one of those books that I wouldn't honestly care to reread, but I would definitely like to write an essay on it, and I would like to talk about it deeply with some people, because this is disturbing. This is very disturbing, and honestly it does relate in a lot of ways to Big Mall. I'm not going to tell you all of the ways, because I think you don't need to know those unless you read the book. This is set far in the future where humanity lives in the ocean. We all live in the ocean, on the bottom of the ocean. SpongeBob SquarePants has come to pass. We're all sandy in our little literal bubbles, living in membranes below the surface of the earth, because climate change has wrecked everything. Well, I shouldn't say climate change, really. We have wrecked everything, and because of that, the world is no longer inhabitable. It is completely way too hot, scorched, and you can't go up there. So we all live at the bottom of the ocean. Our main character is this this one is kind of hard to talk about. This person named Momo, and she is, I think, in her 30s, maybe. It doesn't really matter. She is the best dermal care technician in all of T-City. T-City is where she lives. The world is like obviously very different living on the bottom of the ocean, but we've kept a lot of the same countries and all that stuff. So she lives in T-City, and she is like a dermal care person. So she looks after your skin. She makes you look hydrated. She makes you look healthy. One day, she decides that she is finally going to meet up with her estranged mother, because they haven't been talking for like 20 years. This conversation changes like everything. So what do I want to say about this book? This book is very tricky. It's translated by Ari Larissa Heinrich. I don't know if it's the translation. A lot of this does read a little bit clunkily, I want to say. A lot of time you're like, what the hell is this? Like, what the hell is going on in this world? It's called The Membranes because, of course, like, you have so many different kinds of membranes in this book, so many different kinds of layers covering things up. You have, of course, the ocean that we live under. Momo is a dermal care technician, so she works with your skin, which is, of course, a layer, another membrane, and the list goes on and on and on. This book discusses a lot of, again, capitalist, like uber late stage capitalist, so far in the future after climate change has wrecked the surface of the earth for us. Like, what is going on? Everyone is either plugged into like virtual realities that they struggle to distinguish what is actual reality. There are still like wars going on. People are fighting, not people, machines are now fighting on the surface of the earth for control over different resources that are left over, and you can like watch these battles, and it's all televised, and it's all great fun. She's also constantly being bombarded by these images from her past. For example, when she was a child, she got very sick with a virus. The book discusses a lot of what companies are doing with you. What are they doing with you? What is their interest in you as a product? You are a product. They want your attention. They want your money. They want maybe your whole entire life and body. Like, it's just really, really scary. A lot of this touches on the nature of surveillance, maybe surveillance that some companies are conducting that you don't even know is going on. It is the classic of queer speculative fiction that is written in Chinese. The ending, I remember where I was exactly when I was on the couch and I finished the book. It's one of those moments where you sit there and you can feel like your brain hurting itself, trying to think its way out of something that it doesn't want to think about, can't really even comprehend, struggles to conceptualize. I also highly recommend this one. My number 9 best book of the year is The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born by Aikwe Arma. This was so good. This was so good. Put this on the poll for the World Tour Book Club. It didn't end up getting picked, but I just wanted to read it so bad that I decided to buy it, pick it up, read it anyway, and I'm so glad I did. This book, again, all of these kind of books in the lower part down of this list really focus on just capitalism, because like, look at this cover. Look at it. A lot of the same ideas going on in here, but in a completely different context, completely different time period. This is set in Ghana in the 1960s, just as the regime of Kwame Nkrumah was coming to an end. And it follows this man who is a clerk at a railway station. And he's very different from everyone in his society, because his society in the 1960s is entirely corrupt. Like, it just seems like the whole of Ghana is operating on corrupt business dealings, lies, false advertising. People are making deals with each other behind everyone's back. The government is super corrupt, and nothing holds any remote speck of truth or integrity anymore, is what our main character feels. He's the only one who's not engaging in bribery, even though like multiple people try to get him to like, commit fraud, do some bribes, and get ahead in society, because that's pretty much the only way that anyone around him is getting ahead, is just by being completely unlawful and engaging in acts that like he himself, who identifies as a very upright, moral man, would never even consider. His family is more than a little bit upset with him that he won't engage in this kind of behavior, because his wife sees like their neighbors and their distantly related family members really making like a headway in the world, and getting ahead and getting promoted to these very luxurious positions and getting just like super rich. This book is just despair. You're not in a good frame of mind if you don't want to have endless descriptions of decay and rot and festering wounds that are open, garbage everywhere, buildings collapsing, language that is very much steeped in filth and dirt and the dregs of humanity. Do not pick this book up, because it's super affecting. This book is super affecting, super intense, and it really does just like unearth the very uncomfortable layers of what is going on after Ghana's independence. Such a good little word for this book, unflinching. It deals unflinchingly with the reality of Ghana's independence and like the promise of getting out from under the colonizer's thumb, and like what was going to happen, how much beautifulness there was going to be when they were finally free. And the main character is really feeling the breaking of this promise entirely, because what has happened is that they have succumbed to the very capitalist ways of their post-colonial world, and it's just incredibly heartbreaking. The writing is so succinct, so beautiful. The promise was so beautiful. Even those who were too young to understand it all knew that at least something good was being born. It was there. We were not deceived about that. How could such a thing turn so completely into this other thing? Could there have been no other way? The beauty was in the waking of the powerless. Is it always to be true that it is impossible to have things strong and at the same time beautiful? The famished men need not stay famished, but to gorge themselves in this heartbreaking way, consuming, utterly destroying the common promise in their greed, was that ever necessary? It was very, very, very heavy, but so well executed. And I would read this again. This is one that I would definitely read again in a heartbeat. So that is The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. Okay, you know what I'm realizing? I keep saying every book is about the same damn theme. I don't know. I think my favorite books list at the end of the year always says something about my year, or about the thoughts that I've been having, the things that I've been considering, the things that I've been upset with or celebrated. Very interesting, because the next book is The Lady's Paradise. This was my first Zola. This was also a pick for the World Tour Book Club. This was our read for France. Incredible. Iconic. Gorgeous. Beautiful. Oh, wonderful. But it's also, again, about the development of the modern day department store, and what a societies that are ruled over by advertisers, marketing, buying, consuming, and forgetting about the real problems that are going on. Why did I not piece together that these all had the exact same themes? I think this is going to be a classic for everyone. This is very description heavy, but oh my gosh, like, yes, it's upsetting, and at the same time, the way that Zola writes is just absolutely alluring. It's very alluring to me. Like, I want to get sucked in, I want to get dragged into his writing. I love it. I annotated so much out of this guy. I thought it was incredible. This is about a poor country girl named Denise who comes to Paris. She's looking for a job, and lo and behold, she finally gets a job as a sales girl at the department store that is quickly gobbling up the rest of the neighborhood, changing the face of Parisian business and completely revolutionizing the world of sales and consumption. Themes of like cannibalism and eating and like literal consumption in this book are to die for. The descriptions are to die for. Denise is like just not having a good time. She's just working here because she just wants a job. She just wants to be able to support herself. Her job is in like, it's basically just Amazon. It is literally just Amazon because it's changing the face of the sad little neighborhood where they live. Like, you get to follow shopkeepers who are like only specializing in one thing. Like, they're only selling you umbrellas, but they're gonna sell you the most beautiful, intricate, artisanal, authentic, handcrafted umbrellas, and like they're gonna last you forever. And the department store gets a whiff of this and they're like, oh, our competitor is selling umbrellas, well, let's sell umbrellas and let's just sell them for cheaper. And they're gonna just fly out of the store and we're gonna put this guy out of business. It's so incredibly upsetting. I think I saw a lot of parallels this year with the whole AI explosion. Guys, I love reading, but a lot of these just really made me feel a lot of things. This is one of my favorite classics of the year. I actually didn't read too many classics in 2024. I took a little bit of a step back just because I had read so many classics like finishing up my degree and I wanted a little break. I'm so glad that I did because this just reminded me why I love them. I love the language. I love the older language. This is translated by Brian Nelson. I think this was so beautifufully done. I think he captured Zola's prose so well. It was just beautiful, and I'll read you a couple passages, but just the way that he so lovingly described everything. I love his just like view of the world because you get to see like everything that's going on during the day and age, and you get to have answered so many questions that you have about like, where did these people live? What do they eat? What is Denise doing? How does she do her hair? What is she wearing? Like, how much money is she making? I thought it was fascinating. Walls of cloth formed dark columns, which made the distant tabernacle seem even further away. And there, in this chapel, built for the worship of woman's beauty and grace, were the clothes. In the center was a most striking item, a velvet coat trimmed with silver fox. The dummy's round bosoms swelled out the material. Their wide hips exaggerated the narrow waist, and their missing heads were replaced by large price tags with pins stuck through them, while mirrors on either side of the windows had been skillfully arranged to reflect the dummies, multiplying them endlessly, seeming to fill the street with these beautiful women for sale with huge price tags where their heads should have been. The English lit student is like going feral. Beyond, Paris stretched out, but a Paris which was dwarfed and eaten up by the monster. The houses surrounding it had the humility of thatched cottages and were scattered beyond it in a dust of blurred chimneys. In the background was the Pantheon, lost and shame-faced, no bigger than a pea. The skyline, crumbling into dust, had become nothing but a pathetic frame for the picture, and its distant blurred outlines indicated that it, too, as far away as the heights of Châtillon and the open country, was now enslaved. I loved it so much. I'm a big sucker for descriptions, literally pages and pages, okay? Pages and pages of description. If you don't like description, this ain't the one for you. This ain't the one. I think you're going to be really bored. But for me, having like 20 pages dedicated to telling me exactly how the department store looks, taking me through all the levels. It reminded me a lot of the Paris Opera House and the way it's described in Phantom of the Opera, which I just loved. And being able to see everything that they're selling and like telling me just every little detail about the dresses and the gloves and the whatever. All of these books, this especially, and Big Mall too, like they detail to me worlds that I don't ever really want to be in myself. It just lets me kind of access it in a way that I would just like to explore without having to actually be there. If that makes any kind of sense. Okay. My next best book of the year is Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga. Love this one so much. This was another pick for the world tour. We read this one for Zimbabwe. This one cured my reading slump, which I was not expecting. For a book that honestly does not have very much dialogue, is very heavy on inner monologue, and like it is someone's account looking back at their childhood and growing up. I like sped through this. There was like something in this book that I could not keep reading the words for. Like I was just hooked. I don't know what it was. It was so extremely readable. I got literally kind of addicted to it and I just loved it, even though I can't like tell you that there's anything incredibly special about the writing. It's pretty like simple. I'm just going to tell you how it is, but I was so hooked. I was absolutely hooked. This follows Tambu, who is growing up. The first line of the book is, "I wasn't sorry when my brother died," I think was the line, or "I didn't care that my brother died," or something like that. And you're like, oh, what's going on? It turns out that because Tambu's brother died, she is the one who's offered a spot to get an education with the family's like now very rich uncle, Baba Mukuru, who went to the UK to study and like learn English and all this stuff, and he comes back to Zimbabwe uber rich again. I think this is set in the 60s, late 60s, early middle 60s. Follow Tambu getting an education, but of course it's a very selective education. It absolutely changes her world and her relationship to everyone. I think this is a very honest, real book, because it just, this Denkaramga's like way of being able to show you someone's attitudes, and like coming from the perspective of someone who has grown up and like realizes the maybe faultiness or wrongness, or just that they've changed their mind about something, but being able to fully portray that idea then in that like place where they are, like writing as their 12-year-old self, is, I think it's just so incredible. Again, this book is so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking. Tambu eventually leaves her family to go and live with Baba Mukuru and her cousins, and the relationship that she has with her cousin Nyasha. Nyasha is my favorite character in the whole book. I think she's so wonderfully complicated, but the friendship, the rivalry, the love that these two people have for each other, I adored their relationship. Both of them are very like gifted, smart students, and they both strive to be the best in their class for different reasons, and the path that it takes them down is so heartbreaking, because, for example, Nyasha grew up a little bit in the UK and now she's back, and so she feels trapped between two places. Tambu is quickly forgetting and like trying to distance herself from her family and her traditions. So much of this is having to do with like, what is it like to be a woman? Tambu was never supposed to be in this position in the first place. It was supposed to go to her brother. There's so much discussion about, should she even be getting this education? Like, don't read too many books, that's gonna like boil your brains. What it is to have to choose between self and security. When I was in England, I glimpsed for a little while the things I could have been, the things I couldn't have done if things were different. But there was my husband and the children and the family. Super introspective coming of age novel. Highly recommend. For whatever reason, I seriously flew through this book. I read it so fast, I could not put it down. I really enjoyed it. And this is also a trilogy, so you can bet your buttons I'll be picking up the next one. This next one, I don't have my copy of anymore because I gave it away to a friend because it was so good that I was just like, someone, you gotta have this, you gotta read this, it's so good. However, I will definitely be getting another copy of my own someday because I'm gonna reread this beast if I ever want to go through the absolute headache, confusion, what the hell is going on-ness. Number 6 is If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. Again, world tour. That's why I love it. Oh man, I love reading from around the world. So interesting, so cool, so educational. Love it. This was our pick for Italy. Did it really have to do with anything particularly Italian? Not really. It did have to do with the universal. In fact, it's just, this book is such a pleasure and a pain to read. This is really wholly, I think, a very unique book. It's certainly different from a lot of things I've read before, and to sum it all up, it's really about reading. It is a book about reading. It's a book about books, but it's more about reading. Let me tell you the most confusing part. So, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italo Calvino. Literally the first page is, you are reading Italo Calvino's new book, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. It's all set in second person, and it's all extraordinarily meta. I think if you're not into that kind of thing, you might find it a little bit gimmicky, and I kind of get that. I think for me, some parts of this book took the ideas and the gimmick a little bit too far, but the book begins with like, hey, get comfortable, take your shoes off, find a good place to read. It's incredibly difficult to find a good position to read in, isn't it? You might get a little bit uncomfortable, maybe you need to adjust your pillow, and then all of a sudden it switches chapters to this young man who is reading the book that you are reading, probably, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler, and he gets to a section of it and it stops, and he realizes that it's missing pages. So he walks on down to the bookstore and he's like, hey man, what the heck, you sold me a book that's missing pages. The salesman is like, yeah, we're having a lot of issues. It seems that the book that is in the book that is marked If on a Winter's Night a Traveler isn't actually If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. It's actually this book. And our guy is like, oh well, I got really hooked reading that book, so I'm gonna go buy that book. He buys that book and the exact same thing happens to him. He finds out it's not the book that's in the book, it's a different book, that he goes to buy that book, and then he has to start reading that book, and then it just takes him down this rabbit hole of things. Does that make sense? Okay. Didn't think so. This is composed of like 10 different stories. Our man is trying to read to search for any semblance of like truth. He gets it hooked on one plot and then he starts the other and he's like, wait, I want to know what happens here. Interspersed with these books that he's reading is like his journey to kind of track down and find and just talk to this other girl who's having the same experience as him reading these books. And then he finds out that maybe there's a conspiracy that's making this whole thing happen, and it gets so wild. The most confusing and hard to read book that I've read in a while. That's completely all part of the point that this book is trying to make once you get a little bit further in and you learn a little bit more about this conspiracy. So I won't try to say too much about it, but I will try to say that what is truth? What is representation? What is interpretation? This book is absolutely maddening. I think this book will drive you crazy if you let it, if you think about it for far too long. But I think on the lighter and brighter side is the love letter to readers everywhere, and I really felt that. I really felt seen. I really felt appreciated as a reader, and it was just nice. The book is incredibly quirky. It's incredibly clever. Like I said, I think there are some moments where it gets a little bit too, I was gonna say bricked up. Let me not say that. Let me revoke that. For years, I have been coming to this library and I explore it volume by volume, shelf by shelf, but I could demonstrate to you that I have done nothing but continue the reading of a single book. If you want your brain to be like, please stop, this is torture, then I would pick up If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. Coming down to the top 5, number 5 for 2024 is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is also a book club pick, but a book club pick for the Game of Tomes book club, because look at this tome. Look at her. She's so beautiful. This was my first time reading Louisa May Alcott. I'm so thankful that I got to read this book this year. Technically, I finished it in 2025, but because I read most of it in 2024, I'm just going to count it for 2024, and it's, my channel, so these are my rules. Fantastic. Honestly, this was not what I was expecting from Louisa May Alcott at all. It wasn't. Little Women was not written like I was expecting it to be written as a classic. I think because I kind of forgot the fact that this is written with like a younger audience in mind, but it is just so tender. It's so tender, and it's so beautiful, and it just like healed my inner child who always wanted a sister and who like wanted something like this, and it also made me sad because of that fact. You follow, of course, the 4 March sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. Beth, I will love you until the day that I die. I love Jo, and Meg and Amy, they're there. Love them all, but I just adored this for its frankness, its openness, its big hearts. Like, yes, I feel like every chapter is about a moral, and it all ends with like a moral. Every chapter kind of has to end with a little bit of a lesson, it feels like, especially in the younger years, because we followed these sisters from their early teens and in some cases childhood all the way until they're like 25ish, 26, 27, 28, 30. So it was just so incredibly sweet and heartwarming, but on top of that, so real, so raw, and just like nice. Louisa May Alcott's language ranges from just like simple, everyday, very down to earth, to these absolute bangers of sentences that come out of nowhere and smack you. Sweaters are coming off, sweaters are coming on. I don't know. This was just pure comfort. Don't try to make me grow up before my time, Meg. It's hard enough to have you change all of a sudden. Let me be a little girl as long as I can. I just have a lot of love for this book, and I'm so happy that I got to read it this year. If you got to read it this year for the first time as well, what were your thoughts? It made my heart grow 3 sizes bigger than what it is, and I'm so happy that this book exists. So that is Little Women. This one is surprising to me, but number 4 is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. Oh my gosh, this book like came out of nowhere and went. Sorry, I just beat you up. So much harder to talk about things that you love than that you don't like. And I feel that every single year. Halloween Tree is a very short and sweet middle grade book about Halloween, but it's about so much more than that. The language that Ray Bradbury uses is so interesting. I highlighted something on almost every single page because it was just like, it made me want to live again. It was incredible. It's about this group of boys who are all friends and they go out trick-or-treating for Halloween. They're all dressed up, but very quickly they notice that like the best of them, the most wonderful boy in their group, who's this kid named Pip, he's not there, and they're like, oh no, where is he? And it's like, he's sick. Pip is sick. And who is calling me? Hello?
What happened to Shrek Super Slam?
What?
What happened to Shrek Super Slam?
I think you sold it.
What?
I'm pretty sure I was so angry with you because you sold it years ago.
No, I sold Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Did I sell Shrek too?
I think so. I think you went through a phase where you're like, I'm gonna go sell every game I have.
Yeah, I think so.
And I was like, you dumb bitch. Did you check downstairs in the TV stand? You sound sick.
I'm congested.
Oh, okay. If you find it, let me know.
I will.
Because that's a good game. Okay, do you want to say hi to the people?
How am I supposed to say hi? Everyone, please, if you have a copy of Shrek Super Slam, send it my way. I think I may have sold ours. Big regrets here today.
Off the topic of Shrek Super Slam, here's the quote. It's a super slammer. He rose up like a wild sunflower in the garden. His great round face burned with fresh sun. His eyes flashed Morse code signals. Hurry up, it's almost over. What? Today, now, 6 a.m. Dive down, wade in it. This book was just so full of like youth. It was so beautiful. Of course, it's about friendship and like found family because the kids are all like, oh my gosh, like we want to make sure Pipkin's okay. Like we don't want him to be sick. And they run into this man called Mr. Moundshroud who takes them on an adventure through space and time. I had no idea what this book was going into it, and I was so literally dazzled. It was enchanting to meet you. It was literally enchanting to meet you. This is such a weird ass romp done in the most beautimous of words known to humankind. It's gorgeous. I love how like quirky and like crazy his sentences are. I really love his language. It's seriously like nothing else. It made me smile every single time. It like tickled me. There, do you see it, lads? The undiscovered country out there. Look long, look deep, make a feast. The past, boys, the past. Oh, it's dark, yes, and full of nightmare. Everything that Halloween ever was lies buried there. Will you dig for bones, boys? Do you have the stuff? And along the way, this just like teaches you so much because each of the boys is wearing a different Halloween costume, and the Halloween costume that they are wearing like corresponds to an aspect of history that Mr. Moundshroud like takes them into and teaches them about. And like it's basically just a lesson on where Halloween came from, why we celebrate Halloween, what do we celebrate at Halloween. They go to places like Egypt and Mexico and the Stone Age. It's just so good. It made me so emotional. Ultimately, it's just about like human hope and storytelling and like our love of the light and our fear of the dark and of death and like our just humanness, like the human condition. Seriously, like I think this is such a profound, exquisite little book for like kids. Some of my absolute favorite writing I've read all year. Look at that cover, one of my favorite covers of the year. This is my first Ray Bradbury. So impressed. He is such a little trickster with language, the way he manipulates it, what he does with it, and the absolute perfect tickly sense that it makes is just astounding. I gave it 5 stars and it definitely is one of my favorite reads of the year. Actually, wait, first I have a secret to tell you. Not that much of a secret, but it's a little bit of a secret. So if you could just keep it for me. There's a book which is half on this list and half not on this list. The reason it can't fully be on this list is because I haven't finished it. The reason I haven't finished it is because I keep starting it over and reading it from the start without ever finishing it. And this is my 3rd time doing this now. I mentioned this book once on my channel, I think in a moment with the Book of the Month man, the Bookman, and everyone was like, oh, what was that? Oh, what was that? You're what? You're reading what? You read what? You need to tell us about it. And then I never spoke about it again, and it's because I've been in this cycle of torment. I have stopped normal people every single time with that much left in the book. I think with 55 pages left in the book, I have been like, nope, okay, I feel like I know how Normal People ends, but I honestly have never been spoiled for Normal People ever. I started Normal People in the summer. It's a fun summer read. No, it's a horror book. It's a horror novel. It would be here if I ever finished the damn thing. Did anyone have that Sesame Street book growing up? I think it was featuring Grover, and it was called There is a Monster at the End of This Book. And like, it was just like, please don't turn the page. I don't want to see the monster. Like, stop reading. I don't want you to get there. And it was just Grover having a panic attack for the whole book. Spoiler for that book, he got to the end and the monster was him. That's a little heavy for 4-year-olds, don't you think? The same thing is kind of happening with me with Normal People. This is about these two people who go to the same high school, and you follow them throughout their lives. I read this book and I fell in love with Sally Rooney's writing. I think she's an incredibly intelligent woman. The way that she wrote stuff and portrayed these two people, Connell and Marianne, I was like, oh wow, if I ever need to check my makeup or how my hair's doing or something, I can just look into this book because it's a goddamn mirror. I am in the process of making a vlog that will hopefully have me actually finishing this book, but like I said, my bookmark may be there, but I'm back on page 1. It's funny because I started listening to the audiobook of this about like 4 years ago. I DNF'd it. I finally picked up the physical copy, and feels intellectually unserious to concern himself with fictional people marrying one another, but there it is. Literature moves him. Just to Connell, the same imagination he uses as a reader is necessary to understand real people also, and to be intimate with them. I'm not reading this book is reading me. I don't have anything else to say. I don't want to talk about it. So get to the proper top 3 of the year now, books that I have actually finished and loved and just had seriously such a good time with. Okay, so book number 3 in my best books of the year is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. What a good time. Again, this was a book that like I never particularly wanted to read, never gravitated towards, and it was put on the Game of Tomes book club for this year. This was one of the first books I started this year. Seriously, wow, do yourself a favor and read The Count of Monte Cristo. What a journey. This was so much fun. It was so much fun. This book is so long, but seriously, it does not feel like that. Dumas' writing, he's just such like a sensationalist. I think he makes it so entertaining. It's like this whole book is juicy gossip because we follow Edmond Dantes, who as a young, naive, little marshmallow of a man gets thrown into prison because he has a few men in his life who are extremely jealous of what he has because he's been promoted to captain of the ship that he's working on. He has a very beautiful, wonderful bride to be. And what's the other thing? I think he's just an all-around good dude and everyone loves him for it. So these 3 men hatch up a plot to make it look like he's been conspiring with supporters of Napoleon because it's set during just at the time when Napoleon is he's getting the smackdown. He gets thrown into jail for 14 years. 14 years in one of the worst prisons ever in the Chateau d'If, and it's about him. It's not about him rotting away in prison for 14 years, although of course that really shapes who he is as a person, it's a character builder for sure. It's about what happens when he gets out of prison. And he accumulates a lot of money. And he's like, you know what, I might think about like traveling the world for a little bit and seeing the sights and getting to know like food and culture and literature and weapons. But ultimately, I'm going to come back to Paris. The Count's favorite album is Reputation by Taylor Swift. You can't tell me he's not driving in his little carriage down the Champs-Élysées and he's not listening to Look What You Made Me Do. He's just the most interesting man in the world.
Stay thirsty, my friend.
Again, really funny because I made this video up here about your biggest book crushes, and The Count of Monte Cristo, like, he didn't top the list, but he like nearly topped the list. I think a lot of you wanted him to top such a long book, but the pacing is spectacular. You get to know so many people, like I'd probably say at least 56 characters. So many twists, so many turns, and it's just like delectable. It's honestly a treat to read. It is the best thing to just curl up with. He's an icon. He is the moment, and he is the Count of Monte Cristo. He is bejeweled when he walks in the room. I think this book is honestly just hilarious. It is so funny. I think Dumas is so funny, and I think he knows it, which makes it even better. But I love the Count. Like, he's just honestly, like, he's so deeply sad, right? He's so deeply sad. He's been betrayed. He's lost the love of his life as well, because when he comes out of prison, she's married to another man, one of the men that put him there in the first place. So that's like a double slap in the face. He's lost everything. He's lost his family. And while he does have like a vast sum of money now, it's just like he's so crippled by his past, and like rightfully so, but he's also so funny and so sassy and so self-absorbed. But what commands the Count of Monte Cristo is the Count of Monte Cristo. I do what I wish, Monsieur Beauchamp, and believe me, it is always very well done. For what it is, and for what it is from the period that it's from, it's so cool. It's so cool. Like, I was not expecting Dumas to just full on have like this lesbian escape story. Incredible stuff, like so incredible. I think the women in here are so wonderful. Like I said, we have this relationship that, like, for the time period, I was so surprised to see written about, because it is this woman who absolutely wants nothing to do with like getting married or having a stable, proper job. She just wants to go off with her, I think it's her singing teacher, her singing partner, and like go tramp through Paris. Okay, anyway, that's the Count of Monte Cristo. The second best book of the year for me, book number 2, is none other than The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. Oh my goodness. Not only was book 1 good, book 2 was good, book 3 was good, and of course they're all technically the same book, The Lord of the Rings. So I'm just going to hold up The Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship technically was a reread for me, and I don't include rereads on my best books of the year, but because I had never read The Two Towers or Return of the King, it's here. It's here, and I'm so happy it's here. My favorite was The Fellowship, but for 2024's sake, I will say it's The Two Towers. Cried my soul out through the bottom of my feet reading this book. This was incredible. I don't need to say what The Lord of the Rings is at all, probably. I really probably don't, but just to say that, like, if you haven't read it, go. What are you waiting for? It's there. It's waiting for you, actually. This book is waiting for you to pick it up and just be totally immersed. And I couldn't put this down. It just touched me and touched my heart in so many ways. It's so incredibly stirring and inspirational as well. He's just so talented. I think the care he puts into his world is so admirable and so loving. I heard a quote recently that, like, attention is the highest form of love, or like to notice is the highest form of loving. Like, just being able to notice different things, observe different things, be aware of different things. And a lot of that is Rilke's philosophy. I think it was Greta Gerwig. I think it was like in an interview with her I saw, but that's a lot of Rilke's philosophy as well. Rilke would have loved this. Also, guys, I still really just want to know, who the fuck is Tom Bombadil? Who is he? Not only does this have incredibly loving, beautiful, fully formed characters that, like, you just know inside and out, it has some of the most just some of the nicest relationships I've ever seen in fiction, or in real life for that matter. Like, the relationship between Sam and Frodo, between Legolas and Gimli, between Aragorn and Gandalf, between Pippin and Merry. It's just like, it literally fills me with, I'm literally gonna start crying. And for me, this book is really not so much about the journey to defeat Sauron and destroy the One Ring. I don't really care about that too much, to be honest. I really care more about, like, just the literal journey. I love the physical journey that they go on, but the climate in their minds, especially Frodo, who's going through it. I think he is just one of my absolute favorite characters. He's such a resilient, sweet man. He is so wonderful. On top of that, I think that the portrayals of just, like, masculinity and men in Lord of the Rings is so healthy and so wonderful to see. Rereading The Fellowship and getting into the later books, I was not expecting, nor did I remember Tolkien's, like, environmentalism coming through, which is such, honestly, a big theme in the world, especially with, like, the Shire being what it is, and Galadriel's whole take on things. It was honestly so wonderful. The Ents section, I could stand here, I'm standing up right now. I could stand here for hours and tell you every single thing that I liked about it. I feel like it's a little baby. Do you know what? I feel like it's a little baby that I need to, like, speak to softly and just respect. I think that's a good word for this book. I think the amount of respect I have for this world and the series and everything that goes on in here is really cool. Reading The Lord of the Rings was just like being awash with so much feeling and so much love and so much hope. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. That thing. The thing with feathers. So that's grief, isn't it? Well, grief is a kind of hope. Major thank you to this book. I think this book got me through so much. I mean, all 3 volumes did. Fellowship remains my favorite, followed by Two Towers, and followed by Return of the King. I do this every time I get to number 1 and I clam up. But my favorite book of the year, number 1 favorite book of the year, best book of 2024, is A Ministry of Time by Colleen Bradley. It is The Ministry of Time. Big thank you to Book of the Month, because I didn't even know about this book until the bookman popped up and gave it to me. First thing that should not surprise you, and maybe if you hear it, you'll be like, oh, that's probably why. It's probably why it's on Emma's favorite books of the year, is that this starts with a man trying to find the Northwest Passage on an Arctic expedition. The book starts in the Arctic in the Victorian period. That's not what this book is about pretty much at all. This book is set in the near future in London, following this girl who's been working in the Ministry of Defense as a translator. So she's a translator working with Asian languages. She's British Cambodian, and this plays a lot into obviously just who she is as a person, but there's so much discussion in this book about so many hard to talk about topics, and the way that Colleen Bradley just talks about them, she's not really trying to, I don't know, it just feels so incredibly natural. I think it's such a comfort. There's so much in this book that's oh wow, that's literally exactly what I was thinking. It says so much about our contemporary world, but also so much about the past. She gets called into her senior's office one day. They're like, hey, you're promoted. You're gonna be a bridge. And she's like, what the hell is a bridge? And they're like, well, you're gonna be working with refugees to acclimate them to our society. She's like, oh, okay, where are the refugees from? And her officer is like, they're from the past. And she's like, yeah, we have time travel. I love how blasé a lot of this is. I love her writing style. I don't think a lot of I feel like either you are, either you aren't kind of thing is what I've seen circulating around in reviews. She is assigned to that man who was trying to find the Northwest Passage in the Victorian period because he has been transported along with 5 or 6 others into present day. They've scooped these people out of history, and they are now the expatriates of the past. The company tells her that they're trying to see if the human body can withstand time travel, if it's going to mess anything up in the human body. So she's assigned to this man named Graham Gore, who is a very real historical figure who was really trying to find the Northwest Passage. First of all, it's so funny. I think it's hilarious. Her trying to introduce him to, for example, 2024. He finds out that the British Empire is no longer. Okay, that doesn't go well. He finds out about Spotify. He finds out about climate change. That's heartbreaking. He finds out about, drive-thrus and the fact that women don't wear skirts anymore to hide their ankles. Incredibly charming. The Ministry of Time is a science fiction. It's a romance. There's just so many valuable conversations being had in here, and then on top of it all, it just hits you with these really hard things that the narrator is going through. Falling in love with this impossible man from the past. I think it's so beautiful. What I want to say though, something I do recognize, is that I think this book goes way off the rails. I think this book loses it. I don't think it sticks the landing. I don't think its ending is really a good ending for this book, and in my mind something absolutely completely different happens. I think, and what I feel, and what I'm just gonna say to myself to be true, is that I think Colleen Bradley wanted a different ending and didn't want it to get so action sci-fi, is my thesis, and she had something completely different and soft and quiet in mind, and is what I think fits the book a little bit better. Maybe it was the publishers or her editor being like, no, you have to write it this way because we need a little something in here to excite people. I think it's a bad ending, and I don't think it's very well done, and I do recognize that, and it's still here anyway. I will forgive it for the third act of this book where it really kind of goes off the rails for me. I have a whole vlog because I read this book for a 24-hour readathon, and so many more of my in-depth thoughts are in that vlog, but no spoilers. I'm just in love with this book, frankly. I'd sat with the term internally displaced person until I'd broken it down semantically. I was wrestling with a ghost meaning, a person whose interiority was at odds with their exteriority, who was internally in themselves displaced. I was thinking about my mother, who persistently carried her lost homeland jostling inside her like a basket of vegetables. Gore was internally displaced in this way. I could sometimes see him regarding the modern world as if through a telescope. He stood forever on the deck of a ship somewhere in the early 1800s. He told me stories as if he were trying to catch himself in amber. I also love our main character because the book is being written like from an older version of herself, and she has so many flaws that she points out. Her relationship with herself, her relationship with power structures is just so incredibly, I think, real and interesting. Her relationship with Graham plays a lot into this. I think she's such an imperfect, real person, and her self-awareness, at least when she's writing her tale, is so cool. There's a time when, as a kid, she's so afraid of spiders, but her dad kind of personifies them as like these little nice women who are like making their webs and feeding their family, and eventually she feeds a butterfly to the spider living in her home. Who feeds a butterfly to a spider? But I always thought the story was about something else. Of course, I was still afraid of spiders. I was 8 years old. Mrs. Legs had a dozen eyes and sucked the life out of the living. Yes, I was still afraid of spiders. I had simply found the only way my child's mind could conceive of placating the fear. Join up, take a wing, get to work. Talked about exactly what I wanted to be talked about without even knowing, and I cried my eyes out. I cried my eyes out at this book. Definitely my number one favorite book of the year, The Ministry of Time. If you ever fall in love, you'll be a person who was in love for the rest of your life. Those are my favorite books of the year. I recommend every single one of them on this list, obviously, and I cannot wait to, well, can I wait? Apparently I can wait to finish Normal People, as we've seen, but there will be a video, I swear to goodness, coming soon on where I actually finish that book, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for coming along with me as I try to talk my way through my love for these things, because I so rarely can do it well. I hope you're cozy, and if not, I hope you go get cozy, go read a good book, and find a new favorite for 2025. So until my next video, that's when I will see you. Thank you guys so much for being here. Ciao.